By the time anyone noticed the young man standing outside the restaurant doors, it was already too late. Nothing about his posture revealed the storm brewing inside him, nothing except the way his eyes never left her. Madison Clark had hoped the worst was finally behind her. She was 17, bright, athletic, and determined to reclaim the normal life she had before her relationship with Ryan Hale spiraled into fear. Breaking up with him had been painful, but necessary. His jealousy, his constant questioning, the uneasy feeling of being watched, her friends had gently urged her to leave. Her mother, Elaine, had been relieved when she finally did. Yet the aftermath had been far from peaceful. Ryan began appearing in hallways between classes, waiting outside her after-school job, sending long, emotional messages at 2 in the morning. Madison blocked him, changed routes to school, and tried to ignore the uneasy suspicion that he was always one step behind her. When Ryan was hospitalized briefly after a mental health crisis, Madison hoped it would finally create distance. But the silence afterward only made her more nervous. She told herself he was moving on. She wanted to believe it. On a warm Saturday afternoon in early June, she joined her mother and 2 close friends for lunch at a busy family restaurant. Laughter came easily for the first time in weeks. Madison felt almost normal again, sunlight on her face, the scent of grilled food drifting in the air, the sense that summer might actually be good this year. But when she glanced through the window toward the entrance, she froze. Ryan stood outside, staring directly at her. Her breath caught. Her mother followed her gaze and stiffened. Elaine knew immediately who he was. She had spent too long watching her daughter come home drained and frightened. Ryan's face, once familiar, looked strangely vacant now, as if his thoughts were far away and fixed on something only he understood. "Let's go," Elaine whispered, placing a calm but firm hand on Madison's shoulder. "We'll leave quietly." They gathered their things and slipped out a side door that opened toward the parking lot. Madison's heart pounded, not in panic yet, but in the sharp, instinctive rhythm of someone who knows they are being watched. Her friends offered confused looks, sensing tension but not knowing the full story. They reached the car. Elaine unlocked it. Relief fluttered in Madison's chest. Then a voice cut through the air behind them. "Madison." Ryan was already crossing the pavement toward them. Her mother stepped forward, instinctively positioning herself between them. "This isn't the time," Elaine said carefully. "Please walk away." But Ryan did not stop. Something in his expression chilled Madison to her core, an intensity she had never seen before, as though every emotion he had suppressed had ignited at once. She reached for the car door. And then he lunged. A blur of movement, the glint of metal, Madison's scream, the world shattered in an instant. The first stab took Madison's breath before she could even understand what was happening. A burning shock spread across her ribs, followed by a second impact that sent her collapsing to her knees. The parking lot, moments ago full of chatter and sunlight, blurred into a swirl of asphalt, shoes, and frantic voices. Elaine screamed her daughter's name and threw herself between them, grabbing Ryan's arm with desperate strength. He shoved her aside, wild and unfocused, as if he no longer saw anything except Madison. His face twisted, not with rage alone, but with something broken and unreachable. Words tumbled out of him in choked, frantic bursts, but none made sense. "Stop. Please, stop." Elaine begged, reaching for him again. He didn't stop. Another stab, lower this time. Madison felt it, sharp, deep, terrifyingly cold. She tried to scramble away, dragging herself across the pavement, but her legs were beginning to lose strength. She couldn't feel the ground under her right foot. She couldn't find her voice. She could barely understand that her world was slipping into silence. A table of diners nearby jumped to their feet. Chairs scraped. Someone shouted for help. Another person dialed emergency services with shaking fingers. But one man didn't hesitate. Across the parking lot, a stranger, later identified as Mark Turner, saw the chaos unfold. He didn't know Madison. He didn't know the history or the danger. He saw only a teenage girl on the ground and a blade rising above her. Mark sprinted. His footsteps hit the pavement so hard he barely felt them. As Ryan raised the knife again, Mark hurled himself forward with the full weight of his body, tackling Ryan from the side. The force knocked the weapon from Ryan's hand, sending it skittering across the asphalt. They crashed to the pavement. Ryan fought back, kicking and thrashing, but Mark held him down with raw determination. He pinned Ryan's wrists against the ground, shouting at nearby diners to grab the knife and keep it away. Elaine dropped beside her daughter, her hands trembling as she tried to apply pressure to the wounds. Madison could barely hear her mother's voice. She felt a strange heaviness spreading through her chest and back, an uncomfortable numbness that frightened her more than the pain. "Stay with me, sweetheart," Elaine whispered, brushing hair away from Madison's face. "Help is coming. Look at me. Please look at me." Madison tried. Her eyelids fluttered. The world faded in and out like a flickering light. Sirens grew faintly in the distance. Mark still held Ryan down, panting with exertion. He looked stunned, as if he too was trying to process what had just happened. Ryan had gone eerily still beneath him, his gaze fixed somewhere far beyond reality, as though the fight had drained every last thought from his body. Police arrived within minutes, though to everyone watching, it felt like hours. Officers pulled Ryan away in handcuffs as paramedics surrounded Madison with medical bags and rapid commands. A paramedic's voice cut sharply through the chaos. "She's losing sensation, possible spinal involvement." Elaine's heart dropped. Madison drifted in and out of consciousness as they lifted her onto a stretcher. The sky above her was bright, painfully bright, and for a moment she wondered if she was floating. Her last thought before the ambulance doors closed was simple, childlike, and terrifying. "I can't move my legs." The ride to the hospital was a blur of oxygen masks, shouted numbers, and cold air rushing through the ambulance. Madison heard pieces of conversations, blood pressure, pulse rate, wound locations, but none of it connected into meaning. What she understood, with a growing sense of dread, was that her legs still didn't move. When the ambulance reached the trauma bay, lights flashed above her like fragments of a dream. Doctors and nurses surrounded her, cutting away clothing, assessing injuries, calling out orders that echoed down the hallway. Elaine tried to follow, but a nurse guided her back gently, promising updates as soon as possible. Inside the trauma room, Madison felt herself slipping between consciousness and a strange floating sensation. She tried to ask what was happening, but her voice barely formed a whisper. A doctor leaned over her. "Madison, can you take a deep breath for me? You're doing great. Stay awake." She tried. She failed. Darkness pulled her under. Hours passed. When she finally reopened her eyes, the world seemed quieter, the lights dimmer, the machines beside her steady instead of frantic. A soft beeping marked her heartbeat. Her throat hurt from the oxygen tube. Her arms felt heavy, wrapped in 4 lines. Elaine sat at her bedside, eyes swollen from crying, but holding her daughter's hand with careful tenderness. "Mom?" Madison croaked, voice thin. Elaine straightened immediately. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here." Madison swallowed. The air felt jagged in her chest. "My legs. I can't." "I know," Elaine whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks again. "The doctors will explain everything." As if summoned, the trauma surgeon entered, a calm, steady presence with gentle eyes. He pulled up a chair and sat beside them. "Madison," he said softly, "you sustained several serious injuries. One of the wounds near your spine caused a fracture and significant swelling around your spinal cord." Madison felt her stomach twist. "What does that mean?" There's a possibility of permanent paralysis from the chest down. The words fell into the room like a weight. Elaine covered her mouth. Madison closed her eyes, willing herself not to panic. Her hands trembled. Is it, forever? She managed. We can't say yet, the doctor answered honestly. Sometimes the swelling decreases and movement returns. Sometimes it doesn't. We'll begin treatment immediately and monitor your response. Right now, the most important thing is keeping you stable. Madison nodded, though she barely understood. Tears spilled sideways into her hair. Later, when the doctor stepped out, Elaine leaned over and kissed her forehead. You're strong, she whispered shakily. We'll face this together. Every step. Every day. But Madison didn't feel strong. She felt broken in ways she couldn't yet understand. For the next several days, she drifted through a haze of surgeries, pain medication, and physical assessments. Nurses tested sensation in her legs with cold instruments, gentle touches, light pressure. Can you feel this? No. And here? No. Every answer stole a little more hope. But she wasn't alone. Her friends visited, leaving letters and small gifts. Her teachers sent messages of encouragement. And Mark Turner, the stranger who had saved her life, sent a note through hospital staff, wishing her a full recovery and telling her he would always be grateful he was there that day. One evening, a detective visited to explain that Ryan had been charged and would not be released anytime soon. Elaine thanked him with a quiet, trembling voice, grateful yet overwhelmed. When night fell, Madison stared at the ceiling, fighting the fear that tried to swallow her whole. Her life had split into a before and after. She didn't know if she would ever walk again. She didn't know who she would become. But she knew one thing with absolute clarity. She wasn't ready to give up. Rehabilitation began sooner than Madison expected. Even before she could fully process her diagnosis, a physical therapist named Dr. Harper entered her room with a clipboard, an encouraging smile, and the calm certainty of someone who had seen countless patients rise from unthinkable challenges. Recovery doesn't wait, she said gently. And neither will we. The first sessions were small, tiny, almost invisible actions that seemed unrelated to the life she had known before the attack. Breathing exercises. Arm strengthening. Learning how to turn in bed without injuring her healing spine. Even sitting upright for a few minutes left her exhausted, drenched in sweat, and fighting dizziness. But each time she wanted to quit, Dr. Harper placed a hand on the bed rail and said, 1 inch today makes 1 mile tomorrow. Madison held on to those words. Elaine was beside her through every moment. She read her daughter uplifting messages from classmates, guided her through stretches the way nurses taught, and celebrated every minor victory, every twitch, every tiny improvement. Every day Madison made it through without collapsing into tears. Still, there were moments when hope felt far away. One afternoon, after a difficult therapy session, Madison broke down. I can't do it, she whispered, burying her face in her hands. I can't feel anything below my chest. I don't even know what I'm working toward. Elaine wrapped her arms around her, careful of the surgical dressings. You're working toward possibility, she murmured. And you don't have to believe in it every day. I'll believe for you. The following weeks turned into a rhythm: morning therapy, afternoon rest, evening visits from friends and teachers who refused to let her feel forgotten. Cards covered her wall. A banner reading, "We believe in you, Maddie," hung beside the window. Then, something changed. During a routine session, Dr. Harper touched Madison's right thigh and asked, "Anything?" Madison almost said no out of habit, but paused. "Wait, maybe?" Her therapist leaned forward. "You felt that?" "It was faint," Madison said, heart pounding. "Like a spark?" It was the first sign of returning sensation. A small, delicate thread of hope. Dr. Harper celebrated as though Madison had run a marathon. Elaine cried openly, hugging the therapist and then her daughter. That spark became Madison's new anchor. From that moment on, she pushed herself harder. Hours on parallel bars, gripping tightly as she tried to lift her body weight. Arm exercises until her muscles trembled. Balancing drills that made her dizzy but determined. Progress was slow, painfully slow, but it was real. One day, she managed to shift her weight while sitting without assistance. Another day, she felt pressure in her left foot for the first time. Nurses applauded as if she had performed a miracle. 2 months into rehab, she attempted standing with full support. She held on to the bars, shaking, breath ragged, tears streaming down her face, but she stood. Elaine covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "Madison, you're doing it, you're really doing it." Madison sobbed with relief. For the first time since the attack, she felt a vision of her future forming, not the future she once imagined, but a future she could still claim. Despite everything, she wasn't done fighting. Meanwhile, legal proceedings moved forward. Ryan remained in custody, undergoing evaluations and preparing for trial. Detectives updated the Clark family regularly. Madison didn't ask about him. She didn't need to. Her energy was spent on something far greater than fear. She was learning to rebuild her life, piece by piece, one determined step at a time. By autumn, Madison's rehabilitation center felt almost like a second home, one filled with routines, challenges, and the steady encouragement of therapists who refused to let her doubt herself. Her progress continued, steady but unpredictable. Some days she felt stronger, sensing more movement in her legs. Other days, everything stalled, leaving her exhausted and frustrated. But she had learned to measure her life differently now, not in leaps, but in inches. Her greatest milestone came unexpectedly. During a morning session, she shifted her weight and felt her left leg respond, just enough to push against the ground. Dr. Harper caught the movement instantly. Again, she instructed, voice shaking with excitement. Madison tried. Her muscles trembled, her arms strained to support her, but her leg moved, a deliberate, undeniable motion. Elaine gasped. "Madison, it's happening." It wasn't walking. Not yet. But it was proof that her body was fighting alongside her, not against her. While Madison continued therapy, the legal case against Ryan progressed quickly. The evidence was overwhelming: eyewitness accounts, surveillance footage, his messages, the severity of Madison's injuries. When the trial began, the courtroom was quiet but tense. Madison attended only once, escorted by her mother and therapists, watching from a secure side room with a view screen. Seeing Ryan again after months felt surreal. He looked smaller, drained, almost distant from the person he had been. But nothing about his appearance softened the truth: his actions had nearly ended her life. When the verdict was read, Madison didn't cheer. She didn't cry. She simply closed her eyes, releasing a breath she had been holding since the day of the attack. The judge sentenced Ryan to life in prison with no chance of release. Elaine wrapped her daughter in a trembling hug. "It's over," she whispered. "Not over," Madison replied softly. "But safer." In the following months, Madison devoted everything to her recovery. She practiced standing every day, supporting more of her weight without assistance. She strengthened her arms and core until she could maneuver independently in and out of her wheelchair. Her classmates visited often, bringing school notes, jokes, memories from campus life. They refused to let her feel left behind. And then, nearly a year after the attack, she achieved what doctors once told her would never happen. She took a step. Just one. Just a small, wobbly motion with a therapist on each side. But it was real. And then she took another. And another. Elaine cried openly, covering her face, shoulders shaking with relief. Dr. Harper hugged Madison so tightly she almost lost her balance. That, her therapist whispered, is the moment we'll talk about for the rest of our careers. Word spread quickly among the staff. Nurses stopped by her room to congratulate her. Other patients wheeled in to celebrate. Madison went to sleep that night feeling something she had not felt in nearly a year. Confidence. Her mobility improved week by week. Walking remained difficult, requiring effort and braces and careful balance, but the miracle no one expected was unfolding step by shaky step. As spring approached, Madison received her high school's letter about graduation. She stared at it for a long time, fingers brushing over the words as her mother watched. "Are you thinking about going?" Elaine asked gently. Madison didn't look up. "No. I'm thinking about walking." Elaine's breath caught. "Maddie, you don't have to prove anything." "I know," Madison said, smiling softly. "But I want to." And for the first time, Elaine believed she truly could. Graduation day arrived warm and bright, the kind of morning that seemed to promise second chances. Madison sat in the staging area behind the school auditorium, her cap and gown carefully arranged, her braces secured beneath the fabric. Her wheelchair waited behind her, ready if she needed it, but today, she hoped she wouldn't. Elaine hovered nearby, hands clasped tightly, trying not to show how nervous she was. "You don't have to do this," she whispered for the 20th time. Madison smiled. "I know. I want to." Her classmates gathered around her with genuine affection, no pity, just pride. They had watched her fight through recovery, seen her return to school in small bursts, and followed her progress online through updates her family shared. To them, she wasn't just a survivor. She was a reminder of what courage looked like. Inside the auditorium, families filled the seats. Teachers lined the edges of the stage, and the principal waited behind the podium. When Madison's name was called, a hush fell over the room. She gripped the sides of her walker, heart pounding. One breath. One step. Then another. The audience rose to its feet as she crossed the stage, slow, steady, determined. Her legs trembled, her arms burned, but she kept moving, each step a story of every hour spent in pain, every setback, every spark of progress. When she reached the center of the stage, the principal handed her the diploma with eyes full of emotion. "You are extraordinary," he whispered. Madison blinked back tears. "Just stubborn," she said, but her smile revealed the truth, she had done the impossible. The applause didn't stop for a long time. Even after she returned to her seat, people still wiped their faces, shaken by the sheer power of what they had witnessed. Elaine cried openly, clutching a tissue in one hand and her phone in the other, capturing every second. After the ceremony, students and families swarmed Madison with hugs, photos, and congratulations. One teacher said softly, "You taught this entire school what resilience means." Another told her she had inspired several students to speak up about unhealthy relationships and seek help. But the moment that moved her most came from Mark Turner, the man who had saved her life. He attended at the family's invitation, standing quietly near the exit until Madison spotted him. "You didn't have to come," she said, eyes watering. "You didn't have to walk," he replied. "But look at you." She hugged him, overwhelmed by gratitude. He never called himself a hero, but her life would have ended without him. She knew that with absolute certainty. In the months that followed, Madison continued rehabilitation, pushing herself to grow stronger and more confident in her movement. She began speaking at local schools about recognizing unhealthy behavior, setting boundaries, and asking for help. Young people listened to her in a way they didn't always listen to adults. She spoke from experience, not theory. Her story spread further through interviews, community events, and youth programs. She didn't sensationalize what happened, she spoke with honesty, clarity, and an unwavering desire to protect others from the kind of danger she had lived through. Elaine stood beside her every time, proud and steady. And Madison discovered something unexpected: she had a gift for reaching people. Her fear had transformed into purpose. Life didn't return to the way it was before the attack, not entirely. She still had days when her legs felt weak, or when memories resurfaced with sharp edges. But she also had days filled with laughter, strength, and new dreams. She once thought her life had been taken from her in a parking lot. But in the end, she reclaimed it, not by erasing what happened, but by rising above it. Her journey became a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of persistence and community. And as she stood, steadily, proudly, at the start of her adult life, she understood something she hadn't known before. She was not defined by what tried to break her. She was defined by everything she chose to become.